Major support for these broadcasts is provided by Bank of America Merrill Lynch and Perfect Building Maintenance, New York Community Bank, Kilroy Architectural Windows, New York's Window Company, Greenberg Traurig, LLP, M&T Bank. Additional support is provided by AVR Realty Company, LLC, All Nation Renovation, Bingham McCutcheon, LLP, Briarwood Organization, Capital One Bank, Cassidy Turley, C.B. Richard Ellis, James Orphanides, Centurion Holdings, Chelsea Lighting, Cushman and Wakefield, Dime Savings Bank of Williamsburg, Douglaston Development, DDG Partners, Hal Fettner, Durst Fettner Residential, Friedman LLP, Accountants and Advisors, Gemini Real Estate Advisors, LLC, Genova, Burns and Gian Tomasi, Investors Bank, Jack Jaffa and Associates, Real Estate Consultants, James D. Kuhn Real Estate Center at Syracuse University, Corman Communities, Madison Realty Capital, Margolin Weiner and Evans, LLP, Certified Public Accountants and Business Advisors, Massey Knackle Realty Services, Meridian Capital Group, Newmark Knight Frank, Site Comply, Sterling and Sterling, SJP Properties, Stonehenge Partners, the Wickoff Group, Urban American, Ackman Ziff Real Estate, Eastern Consolidated, Goldman Properties, the Moynihan Group, Muss Development, RAL Development Services, the Spandrel Group, LLC, Triangle Equities.
They call him a political strategist. They call him Mr. Fix-It. They call him a communication specialist. But I call him Hank. I call him Hank because he's Hank Sheinkopf. And Hank Sheinkopf is a friend. Hank Sheinkopf has a unique career. And Hank is the president CEO of Sheinkopf Communications. And Hank, thanks for being here today.
Thank you for having me in.
So Hank, you know, you have an interesting life. You know, we were talking when I interviewed you and I started to look at research, and fortunately I looked at a New York Times article that you told me to research on September 11th, 2001. But here's the interesting thing. Your parents really got married at a very young age.
My mother was 15
Your
when
mother
I was born. My father was 19. Yeah.
Now,
true.
but they were on their. They were going to with. They were
when they
Zionists?
met. Well, when they met, they were on their. They were both on their way to revisionist Zionists, the Jabotinsky, Beitar people, and they were on their way to talk about fighting in the War of Independence in Israel in 1948.
And why do you think they were on the way to do that?
Well, because they were committed. My mother was committed. I think they also really wanted to get out of the house, to be truthful. It was not pleasant in those years.
But you said that your parents both had lost like their entire family.
Well, my father grew up having no uncles on his father's side, no aunts, no cousins. They were all murdered by the Nazis. I mean, this is pretty significant. And in the neighborhood we grew up in the South Bronx, lots of DPs lived there because it was cheap, and that was a place for them to go. And I remember our doctor, even Dr. Butler, who was murdered by drug dealers in the street because he carrying a doctor's bag one day. Now, he was from Germany, and he escaped. He left. He beat the Nazis, but he couldn't beat the heroin addicts.
No, but that was later on. But when you were born in a hospital which was run by an individual, Dr. Leff.
Well, in those years, many of the hospitals in New York City were owned or operated by particular doctors. Dr. Leff owned that hospital. Dr. Leff, we later know, as I recall reading, went to the jail for doing abortions, which tells you that I was one of the lucky ones, you know?
Yeah, but you know...
Or unlucky, depending upon your point of view.
Right. Now the real question on lucky or unlucky is that you truly had an abusive childhood.
Well, it wasn't easy. I mean, I used to... I did live in a family from the time I was 7. Best years of my life were spent in a place called Green Chimneys. I'm still close to the Ross family that runs it.
Tell me what Green Chimneys was. I mean, you were honored this past May by Green Chimneys.
Well, I sit on their board. It's a more than 50-year relationship. I sit on the board of the Friends of Green Chimneys. Among the other boards, I sit on the board of the Hebrew Food Burial Association too. I mean, I try to repay the greatness that God has given me, and that's been an extraordinary run. Green Chimneys today is a residential treatment center for kids with children with significant problems, and the last stop for many before Rikers Island. When I was a kid, it was a place for parents to dump their kids. They had nothing else to do with them, and we got pretty much dumped, my brothers and I.
Right, you have two brothers.
Two brothers from my father's first marriage and one from my father's second marriage.
So you're at Green Chimneys, and then you're no longer at Green Chimneys. And at this time, your parents, I think
my parents divorced in between. I mean, my mother abandoned us when I was about 6, and then my father subsequently disappeared, and he paid for a woman to look after us while he was running a bar downtown. It didn't quite work out. And we went to Green Chimneys, and I lived when my dad ran out of money. It was a bad time. I went to live with, my mother came and got me, and I went to live with her and her husband.
And that was in Brooklyn?
Yeah, I was in Brooklyn. And it was just every
and
day.
You graduated?
Junior high school 62. I might put a plug in for a man that I still speak to. He's 81. His name is Martin Cohn. He was a teacher, a proud member of the UFT, I might add, and a teacher at junior high school 62 in the early 60s when I was there. And I would come into school, because I used to battle my stepfather every day in and out of the house. In the evenings when he was fists, I'd come in with black eyes, split lips. In those years, people didn't report this stuff. And Marty Cohn took my mother and her husband on one night when they came to open school night, which was unusual because really nobody gave a damn about what happened to me. My father wasn't interested. They weren't interested. My father never showed up either. And he took them on, and they were abusive to him and nasty, but I still speak to him. He's surprised I'm still alive. I mean, I used to fight my way into the house and out of the house. I was in that house, I lived in my mother's house. They used to mark the food in the refrigerator, what I could eat, what I couldn't eat. My job was to clean the house. And if I didn't, I'd have to go fist to fist with her husband. And this was constant. And one day, I walked out of that house. I was 15, I never came back.
Now, by that time, you moved out of the house.
Well, they took us,
they moved to Huntington.
Yeah, they took me to Huntington because she finished college. She was going to school part-time and finished college. Remember, she had to drop out of school. In those years, when you got knocked up, and she was at 15, you couldn't stay in public schools. So my grandfather paid for her to finish high school, and then ultimately she went back to college, to her credit, and she went to City University and finished at Brooklyn College, and became a teacher in Long Island. That's where they got their jobs. And I lived with them for about a year and a half, 2 years in Long Island.
So you're 15 years of age. You're living where?
Well, I walked out of the house. The cops are looking for me because what my mother and her husband wanted was for me to get put away in a youth facility because I figured, what the hell, wasn't important to them. And and all of this, remember, during all this period of time, if I don't bring money in, I don't eat. By the time I'm 12 years old, if I don't bring money into the house, there is no food.
But let's talk about the 12 and 13 because I failed to, and I'll talk about it a little later. Recently, you became an ordained rabbi.
I am, that's true.
Now, what happened was, how did you, at 12 years of age, decide, with a fractured home, as one would say, to get bar mitzvah?
There are certain things inside people that remain there. And I think Carl Jung was right, the eminent psychologist was right when he talked about a collective unconscious. I mean, it was just my identity. It was who I was. I had to do it. And we figured out a way to do it. It wasn't the fanciest thing, and I wasn't very, very educated about it. But I learned the portion of the Torah, for those who don't know anything about these things. There's a special portion that gets read on the new month. And I read the Maftir, which is the special portion for that month. And I don't even remember when it was, but we did it, and it wasn't a very pleasant experience. I mean, I liked it, but the families, nobody liked each other. They're yelling and screaming, and I went out and played ball afterwards.
Okay, let's get back to 15. You're out of the house at 15. Where are you living? You said one of your
I was
friends?
very fortunate.
I
I moved around from friend to friend. There was one family that Michael Selden, now living in California. I haven't spoken to him in many years, but he took me in, and then the family decided that it would not be in his interest for me to stay there, and I had to find some place to go, and I had no place to go. And I also had the cops looking for me because my mother had sent the cops out. And it wasn't that they wanted me in the house so much as they didn't want the public embarrassment of it. And the cops were in that house when I lived with my mother 2-3 times a week. I once had to nearly stab my stepfather to get rid of him. And he was beating her up. So it was, why I defended her, I don't know. But these were not pleasant people. I can tell you that if I didn't bring dough into that house, I didn't eat. So I had to make sure I brought money.
You had a variety of jobs.
Well, yeah, from the time I was 12, I was out knocking on doors. If I couldn't get a job, I'd knock on store doors, wherever they were. I'd say, you need somebody, you need somebody, you need somebody, until I found some. Didn't matter what it was. But no dough, no fun. And when I called my father to come and rescue me for these things, he said, I'll be right there. Well, you know, it's 50 years later. I'm still waiting. You know what I mean?
So let's talk. You graduate Huntington High School.
No, I didn't. I dropped out of high school at 16. I had no place to go. I went to the Ross family at Green Chimneys because I'd worked there all the summers.
So when you graduate high school?
And hold on, I said, I got no place to go. I got nothing. I need a place to live. Would you take me in? I didn't have to ask them twice. They took me in. I was able to go. I lived in Brewster for a year, finished high school, and then I was at a loss. I didn't know what I was going to do with myself. I mean, I didn't have anybody telling me what to do.
But
my guidance counselor, I will say, Mr. Daly, in high school told me that it was the best thing for me would have been probably not to come back to high school. I should have finished dropping out. And as I recall, that I was certainly not college material, and that because in those years, not everybody went to college, so I was definitely not college material. I should consider the service or getting a trade, which would be a better option for me. That's what he told me.
But now you get accepted to.
Well, my
college.
father lived.
Your father lived in Queens.
My father lived in Queens. So I took advantage of that, and I said, you know, I don't have any money. I don't have any. I have no money. I have no place to live.
But here's.
Hold on. I got no money. I got no place to live. I got no job, and I have really no future because I don't know what was going to happen. I said, I'll go to City University because it was no cost, and I applied to Queens College, and lo and behold, I got accepted. Except when I go to registration at Queens, there's no registration information for me there. Because it seems, because I wasn't paying attention, I'd signed some document that sent me to a place called York College. So York College is a brand new unit of the City University. This is 1967. I'm one of 130 people. And here's a case, again, of divine providence, because I got the kind of attention and created relationships, some of which have lasted throughout my life, and have increased the debt that I owe to New York City and to this extraordinary university.
So now you became when you were like 20, when you were going to York College.
Well, I worked my way through. I mean,
I know you did.
I was a dishwasher. I got help from my father. My father was trying to slip me a couple of bucks. He did my rent. I lived in a basement apartment in a house in Queens, on 78th Road. The toilet and bathroom were upstairs. I had a hot plate. It was great. And my father was helping me out with the rent a little bit, and I was working as a dishwasher
and then
a
you
porter.
become a cutter,
I became a counter man, and I walked. Somebody says to me one day, there's always somebody that shows up and says something interesting. He says, you know, what was his name? Bryn was his last name. I can't remember his first name. Now he says, I work at a place called Bands near Alexander's on 63rd Road in Queens.
Bams or Benz?
Bands, B-N-D-S. The Band family. They had a delicatessen in the South Bronx. And they left the South Bronx like most of the Jews did, and they wound up opening a store on 63rd Road. You know, come on in, they could use you. So I learned the craft. I joined the Counterman's Union, and I wound up working at places like the Carnegie and the Stage, and you name it, I was there. And I spent a long period of time being sent by the union to places that were closing up in neighborhoods that were changing. So I got not only did I get to earn a couple of good bucks, but I also got to see the city in decline in the 70s and 60s.
Now, what's also interesting is while you're there, one of your other jobs is you were parking cars in Queens?
Yeah, well,
which got you into politics.
Well, it's wild. There was a guy named Mark Powers, who I still talk to, who became very religious some time ago, and lovely wife Louise. I was the best man in his wedding in 1969, by the way. He got married. It was kind of a quick arrangement, and they have 2 wonderful children and a great life. Anyway, they live in Pennsylvania. So I'm parking cars for Mark's father, who's got to go one of those lots that they used to be, I don't know if they still exist, on 179th Street and Hillside Avenue, because all the commuter buses would come in from Nassau County. And Mark says to me, you know, I'm involved in politics. I said, great. He said, what do I know? He said, well, I get you 35 bucks a week. We need somebody to work in a campaign. I said, I figured 35 bucks a week, 30 bucks a week, whatever it is, great, I could use the dough. He says, what do I have to do? He says, you'll figure it out. The guy's name was Herman Badillo. It was his first campaign for mayor in 1969. And, you know, things work out. The next day I'm in a room looking at Jim Vlasto, who was the first real political press secretary that I ever met, and Jeff Greenfield, I think, in 69, working on the campaign. Steve Berger's running it. I'm watching all this, and it was pretty extraordinary. And and there's a Blarney Stone downstairs from the campaign headquarters on Roosevelt Avenue, and things were pretty good.
And then what happens?
What happens? Well, that ends. The next thing I know, I'm working at a.
You work for the Queens Tribune?
Well, that was later on. But next thing I know, I'm working for when a coffee shop as a short order cook, doing lunches and dinner, as a short order cook in Great Neck of all places, and then suddenly that ends, and I wind up in California. I hitchhiked across the country, back and forth, and it's pretty interesting. I wanted to see America.
Come back to New York.
Mm-hmm.
Come back to New York.
Come back to New York. I'm a usual setup of fifth. I have no job, no place to live, no prospects. I'm still at the university. I'm kind of sludging through. It wasn't pleasant for me or easy. I think the impact of having no family and no stability was finally beginning to catch up with me in my late teens. I met the woman who became my first wife, actually, in that first Badillo campaign.
When did you become a Port Authority cop?
I was a cop. First of all, I worked as an investigator for the City Department of Correction in the early 70s, and I was assigned to, most of my work was in internal security. And I worked on, there were some very bad people running around, a lot of cop killers. The police department had an interest in keeping them in jail. I worked with every agency known to me.
And then you joined the...
Well, it was a typical Hank move. I stood up for a captain that I worked for who was in trouble. And it was time for me to leave, because I've never been a kind of guy to give up my friends. It's just not what I do.
Then you got back into, you worked for the Daily News.
2000 I was a columnist briefly for the Daily News. I've also been a contributor to CNN. But what I really wanted to do in life was to be a reporter. Just worked out differently.
Reporter. But now, how do you one day in 1981?
One day in actually 78. One day I'm a cop, and the next day I decide I got to change my life. I meet a guy at John Jay College who's since passed, who's an extraordinary man. I keep meeting these interesting people. I mean, his name was Sam Janis. He was a psychologist. And we got to talking, and he said, "What are you doing with your life?" I've been through everything. I remember people being shot. I mean, I had friends that were in combat on a regular basis. It was a different world. I've been on surveillances, and I've been pretty close to things. And I remember one night I was in a bar and minding my business. I in those years I spent a lot of time because I had nothing else to do. I had no family, no place to go. And this kid bumps into me to show he's a tough guy. I don't know why. He's got one guy on each side of him, and he reaches into his belt with a full fist, and I had my gun on my ankle, and I put it in his testicles. I said, "Go ahead." Now, at some point in your life, and then I had a burglary in a warehouse that I had to clear every room. And then during the Black Liberation Army investigations, which I participated in significantly during my years in the correction department, we did a lot of surveillance activity on people who were trying to get people out of jail. It was pretty significant. One day you wake up and you realize, or I remember one day I had some lunatic. I was there. He was throwing people out of a bus after blowing each one of their brains out. You see these things. At some point, you have a moment, you have an epiphany of mental health, and you say, "What am I doing, and why would I die for strangers?"
So how did you decide to go into the communications business?
Sam convinced me, may rest in peace. He died this past year. And he said to me, "What do you have to lose?" He was the first person in my life who was able to convince me that my life had some value. There was nobody else. Now, my life had value, and that I could do extraordinary things.
Some of those early campaigns. You worked for the union in 1985.
Well, I was the spokesman for the hotel union during the strike in '85, which was great. I had him on there. I had a natural ability in PR, and although I must tell you a great story, I went to Howard Rubenstein's office. I once said this to him. He chuckled, and he and I have been pretty good friends over the years. Looking for a job in '78, Somebody, I think it was the late Judge Bobby Brownstein, made a call and got me an interview. And I got interviewed by an executive there, and they said to me, well, you really shouldn't think about going into this business. You know, we can't use you. I said, why? I said, you're not very good. He says, you'll never make more than $15,000 a year. I said, okay. Guess they were right. No. Guess not.
Okay, so we have the union. And then what was your first major campaign that you worked on in New York?
I worked on a lot of campaigns in New York, and I was doing things that were interesting. I mean, the best campaigns are the ones you don't win, because you probably do your best work when you come from behind. I mean, I've also worked, as you know, for President Clinton.
We'll get to that.
I've worked for Mike Bloomberg. I've worked for all kinds of people. But 1979, I get Eddie Rogowski, to who was important in the place we were sitting, because he was a critical player in the creation of CUNY TV. Was my first college professor and used to take me home to feed me because I didn't have enough money to eat. Like the cafeteria ladies at York College used to give me some extra food because I didn't have enough dough to eat. But so I got off track, Michael. I'm sorry.
So Eddie.
So
that campaign.
So Eddie Rogowski says to me, "There's this guy running for borough president of the Bronx, you know, and I've been knocking around campaigns for years." I said, "Okay." His name is Victor Marrero. Great. 6 weeks to go. Nobody knows who he is, and the first poll thinks that he's a fruit. That Massaro. His name is Massaro, and he's some kind of fruit. So I bump into a guy named Walter Diamond. I go into a storefront in the middle of South Bronx. The South Bronx is falling apart. There's still a Jan's on the corner of Kingsbridge and Fordham in the middle of all this madness. So I go in. This guy Walter says, Jack Clark's the campaign manager. He says, you got to meet this guy Walter Diamond. So what is a Walter Diamond? I sit down at a table. He says, come. Walter Diamond says, we'll have a cup of coffee. He works for Barry Feinstein, who was then head of the local 237, the Teamsters. Very powerful. He says, Walter takes his teeth out. It's fascinating. Puts them on the table in a napkin. Then orders a cup of coffee with cream in it and lights up a Benson Hedges 100 cigarette. Kind of odd. We become the best of friends. This campaign changed my life because I don't know how we're going to win it. We're 6 weeks out. This guy's got nothing. But I looked at the numbers, and Walter looked at the numbers, and we came up with a particular conclusion, which was that the Bronx had changed entirely demographically, that it was 70% black and Latin, that if we got the New York Times endorsement, the Jews would vote for Marrero. He'd come in first. If not, it'd be Simon, the organization guy, would win. Marrero would be second. Gallagher would be third, the black. And the reformer from the Bronx, Coppell, would come in fourth, which is exactly what happened. It taught me a lot about perception of race. It gave me a dislike for liberals that has lasted till this day. Also because a blue-collar guy like me is the very person the liberals keep talking about, but they wouldn't want me in the same neighborhood.
How did you get involved with the Clinton campaign?
I'd done a lot of work in the Deep South. I've worked in 44 states and 15 foreign countries. I mean, I've worked all over the world. And a fellow named Dick Morris somehow we became friends long before he became a right-wing pundit. And he thought I had some skill. And we'd worked all over the South together. And he said, I'd like to bring in the Clinton campaign. And I'd worked for the president through Dick before. And I wind up there. And we're, next thing I know, I'm shooting the first spots and editing them in 1995 for the 1996 campaign.
Now, a couple of years ago, you worked for 3 campaigns in New York at the same time, right?
2001, I did Bill Thompson for controller, Betsy Gotbaum for public advocate, Mark Green for mayor, and 3 primaries, 3 runoffs down. I won them all. And then Mark, of course, I lose control. It's been written about by Fred Siegel and others of the Mark campaign, and he loses, but Thompson Gotbaum do. And I don't think anybody's ever done that before.
And you did Spitzer's campaign?
I worked for Spitzer in 1998. It's the only tough race he ever had. I did that campaign. I worked for Mayor Bloomberg. I faced Rove constantly in the South during the 90s, and it's kind of even up.
You worked in Mexico, Puerto Rico.
I worked in Puerto Rico. I've worked in Mexico, Colombia, Venezuela, Aruba, Bermuda. I worked in Europe. Let's go to Africa.
Let's go to a little bit on family. You meet Debbie when?
I meet my wife, Debbie Sheinkopf, in 1987. She's a yeshiva girl who doesn't want to have anything to do with yeshivas again, from Far Rockaway. It's a Saturday morning. She's reading the New York Times magazine, A Fire Island on the Dock. And I didn't get the paper delivered. I used to So I didn't know that you got it on Saturday. So there you go. That's that.
So you met Debbie. You have 2 children.
Isaac and Sarah. Isaac is 18. He's at the University of Rochester, and Sarah is 15.
Let's talk about other things. How did you decide to go to become a rabbi this year?
It was something I wanted to do. When I was 17 and I was trying to figure out what to do with my life, and I must say that the only thing that has really given me stability, gave me stability until this present marriage, I was married before, was Judaism and religion and a sense of belonging. I never belonged any place. I mean, I never really belonged anywhere in my life. But when I was running from the cops and I was running from my mother and her husband, the synagogue was the place that gave me solace and protection.
So how did you decide? I think it was Rabbi Ben Yaminson.
Yeah.
You were at a Sivas Hashem event.
I was at a dinner for a Chabad synagogue, which I've been active, and one of the guests introducing me is a fellow named Yerachmiel Ben Yaminson, who was head of an organization called Sivas Hashem, of which I've been a member of the executive, I think the executive council board,
Right.
or advisory board, one of them for many years, and he challenges me to do it. So I sit down and I learned, a lot, and 2 years later, I took the tests and I became, I was ordained.
And and then you got your master's.
My master's from John Jay. The government paid for my bachelor's at the City University. The government paid for my master's. I was a cop, so they paid for it out of the Law Enforcement Assistance Administration. And my coursework is completed for PhD. I've done everything. My dissertation proposal is being looked at, hopefully to be approved very quickly, and I'll finish it and get it done.
So what do you want to do later?
I am the luckiest guy I know. Without City University and without New York and without a union card, I don't know what would have happened to me. I mean, I just don't know. I'm just the luckiest guy I know. I don't know, but I'm having a good time, and I have no intention of retiring. If there's a strike or there's a conflict or there's a campaign or there's a communication problem, or Jim McGreevey needs to be walked out a door, which I did, or there's a criminal case that requires PR, or a developer that's got real trouble, I'm the guy they call. Why? Because I know what it means to get yourself out of trouble.
So, Henry, I've done a lot of interesting lives, and you and I know each other a long time.
That's true.
And I'm really happy that you've been my guest today, and thank you.
Thank you for having me in.